Hello everybody and welcome. This is Verdigris and here's my first look at the Vengeance Demon Hunter. The Demon Hunter is the new hero class that will be introduced in World of Warcraft Legion. They have two specs, one for tanking and one for DPS. Vengeance is their tanking spec. Their DPS spec is called Havoc. In this video I'm going to go over their abilities and their talents. And we'll start with the abilities in the spellbook. First ability we're going over will be Consume Magic. This is their interrupt. It has a 20-yard range and a 20-second cooldown. So it has a longer cooldown than most other tank interrupts, but you can use it at range. It'll lock a target from a school of magic if you interrupt them for 3 seconds. This is really good because you'll be able to get those distant range casters to come to you with the rest of your death ball, but you can't use it as often. And unlike Havoc, there's no additional benefit. When Havoc successfully interrupts, they get a full bar of Fury. We get no additional benefit, but that's okay because it's one interrupt out of 3 that we have. The other 2 being Arcane Torrent that we get from being a Blood Elf. Sorry, negatives, you'll just have to live with that dodge. And our second one being Sigil of Silence, which goes into our Sigil abilities. These are abilities that you can place on the ground around you, and after a couple seconds they will activate. Sigil of Silence will silence all enemies affected by the sigil for 6 seconds. So those are 3 abilities to deal with casters, and that's pretty good. Our second ability that we're going over will be Demon Spikes. This is our main active mitigation ability that we're going to be using. It comes with 2 charges and costs 10 pain. It causes us to increase our parry chance by 20% and reducing physical damage taken by amount modified by our mastery. So at higher levels of mastery, it'll reduce more physical damage. It doesn't reduce magic damage because the Demon Hunter, as a tank, has Demonic Wards as their passive, which increases our stamina by 20% and reduces magical damage taken by 30%. It's passive, it's always active, and so that's great. It also confers us the benefits that most other tank specs have with their tanking ability. The next ability that we'll be talking about will be Fellblade. We'll also be talking about Shear and Soul Cleave in this part, because those are the 3 abilities that tie together to create our core rotation. Fellblade is the only ability that the Vengeance Demon Hunter gets, regardless of talents or anything else that generates pain. When we use it, it deals a good amount of fire damage and generates 20 pain. It has a cooldown to it though, and that's where Shear comes in. Shear does a little bit less damage than Fellblade, doesn't generate any pain, but it reduces the cooldown of Fellblade by 1 second. So by using Shear, you'll be able to get Fellblade off cooldown a lot quicker and generate that pain. That pain can be used for Demon Spikes, which has the 2 charges to reduce the physical damage taken, and it can also be used for Soul Cleave, which deals even more damage than Fellblade in a frontal cone and severs 3 soul fragments from the target that heals us for 5% of our maximum health per fragment. So when we use Soul Cleave, after a short delay, because the soul fragments have to take time to animate coming to you, we get 15% of our maximum health back. Shattered Souls is the passive ability that talks about the soul fragments. Some of our abilities can shatter the target's soul and release the soul fragments that heal us for 5% of our maximum health. The only ability so far is Soul Cleave and some talents. And the fact that we don't have to run over these fragments to pick them up like the Havoc one does, or like Chi Spheres or anything like that, they just automatically comes to us, kind of makes me feel that soul fragments are sort of like window dressing on something that could just say, and after 1 second, heal you for 15% of your max health. Soul fragments is just kind of flavor dropped on top of that. No real mechanical need for them to be soul fragments. But anyways, your core rotation will be trying to Soul Cleave as much as possible, Fellblade to get the pain to Soul Cleave, and Shear to get back Fellblade. If you're not shearing, you'll be using some of the other abilities in our kit and weaving them throughout. This brings us to Fiery Brand, the next ability. It instantly deals fire damage to the target and reduces the damage that they do to you by 40% for 8 seconds. Note that this is a single target cooldown. It has a talent ability that causes it to spread, making it more useful in an AoE situation, but on its own, it only works for 1 target. Next ability we have is Gateway to the Fellhammer. Fellhammer is our class order hall. It's what you're seeing in the background right here. Every class has one of these, and this is just ours. Glide is the ability that all demon hunters have, in addition to their double jump. You jump twice, and the third time you pop wings out and you glide. Basically means you'll never die to the elevator boss, which is cool. Next ability we have is Immolation Aura. This is the demon hunter's response to the paladin's Consecrate. It instantly does damage to the area around us, and then causes us to tick damage every second for 6 seconds. On its own, it's pretty much only good for big packs. With the talent, it's possible it might be useful in single target as it starts to do more damage than sheer. Infernal Strike is the next ability. It replaces Fell Rush that Havoc Demon Hunters have, which is kind of a bummer, because while it is useful and causes us to be able to leap around and cover distance, pick up adds, things like that, Fell Rush is really cool because you can actually use it in the air to cover more distance that way. So for a mobility thing and traversing the overworld, that would be really great to have, even if they shared charges. Infernal Strike comes with 2 charges and recharges 1 every 15 seconds. It does a little bit of damage on its own, and with our artifact weapon, currently one of the abilities it has is to cause that damage to happen twice. The next ability we'll go over is Metamorphosis. This is what the Demon Hunter is pretty much known for. It's the ability we stole from the Demo Locks. It is one of our cooldowns for defensiveness. Transforms into a demon for 10 seconds, increasing our current and maximum health by 30%, and generates 10 pain every 1 second. So while it's active, chances are we'll probably be able to get 3 to 5 soul cleaves off. And with all of that extra healing on top of the 30% bump you have, chances are even if you're really low, you'll get back to full. Next, I'll go into the other 2 sigils that we have. Sigil of Chains is an ability we place on the ground around us, and after a couple seconds, when it pops, it'll pull in all enemies, like Gorfine's Grasp. You know, that has a 2-minute cooldown, unlike Gorfine's 1 minute, but all enemies affected by the sigil that are pulled into the center will have their movement speed reduced by 70%. So it's good for that first pickup, but afterwards you may not see it as much or as often. The Death Knight's Gorfine Grasp is a little bit more reliable this way because it has half the cooldown, and chances are you may not need that slow. The next sigil is the Sigil of Flame. This has a 1-minute cooldown and is kind of like a ground-targeted, more powerful Immolation Aura. It does initial fire damage and then an additional fire damage dot to all enemies affected by it. Good for the AoE. It's good for single target because it outpaces the Shear and the Fellblade, so you kind of are going to want to use that on cooldown or when most opportune. Next ability we'll talk about is Spectral Sight. This is the Demon Hunter ability that lets us see our enemies through walls, see treasures, see dead enemies too. The fire will pop up around your screen, and anything that you'll see with it active will be highlighted. Enemies will be in red, treasures in purple, and dead enemies in orange. Next ability we're talking about is Throw Glaive. This is sort of a confusing ability for some people. They want to weave it into the AoE rotation, but it's not really for that. It's more for picking up targets at range. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an increased threat modifier, but the damage it does is so low that it's not worth wasting that cooldown to not use Shear, to use Fellblade so that you can use the frontal cleave of Soul Cleave. Next, we'll talk about Torment. This is our taunt. When we taunt, we also generate additional threat against the target for 3 seconds. Not much else to say here. It's good. It's 8-second cooldown, just like everybody else. It's just our taunt. I've talked about Demonic Wards. And so next, double jump. You see that. And Shattered Souls. And now we'll talk about talents. In the first tier, we have Abyssal Strike, Speed Demon, and Soul Flare. Abyssal Strike causes our Infernal Strike range to be increased by 10 yards and generate 20 pain if it damages at least 1 target. This is really great because it gives us that added utility of being able to go further with our leap, as well as being able to use it in place and generate pain on target. Currently, with Fellblade being the only thing we have to generate pain, our options are pretty limited, so having this ability that generates as much pain as Fellblade does is really great, especially because we can use it in place. The second ability we have there is Speed Demon. I wouldn't recommend this talent only because it ties into Fellblade, which has that cooldown, and gives it a charge, which we already kind of have via Infernal Strike. And because we can use Infernal Strike in place, and it generates pain at range, it seems to really outpace Speed Demon. Then we have Soul Flare. Our auto attacks have a chance to generate a soul fragment. This is a great passive option because during our auto attacks, we have the chance to just randomly heal 5% of our maximum health. However, if we're spending a lot of time at full, these extra soul fragments are just going to be wasted into overhealing, and for that reason, I would recommend Abyssal Strike. However, you have a passive option in Soul Flare and an active option in Abyssal Strike. If you find yourself not using that Infernal Strike to generate pain while in place, Soul Flare may be a better option for you until you get used to the rotation. Second tier, we have Agonizing Flames, Blade Turning, and Feast of Souls. Agonizing Flames is that ability I was talking about before that might make Immolation Aura useful in a single target situation because it increases the damage and radius of Immolation Aura by 100%. So that increased damage makes it start to outpace Sheer a little bit, and that's why I'm kind of making that question. However, I often prefer to go with Blade Turning, where parrying an attack generates 4 pain. In an AoE situation, you're going to be parrying a lot more attacks because there's a lot more attacks happening, and that means that your pain generation is going to go up a lot, giving you more options to use your Demon Spikes and your Soul Cleave. Third option is another passive option. I really like that they include these passive options because it gives you something that you can just go into so you can learn the spec and then advance at your own pace. Feast of Souls is the passive option that gives your soul fragments an additional hot on top of that 5% heal that they give you. The third tier, we have Burning Alive, Pain Tolerance, and Violent Sigils. Burning Alive makes your fiery brand deal fire damage every 2 seconds and spread from the primary target to a nearby enemy. This is what lets your fiery brand be useful in an AoE setting because you can use it, it'll spread, that 40% damage reduction will be on the entire pack in just a couple seconds. Really useful. I like it. I prefer it a lot more to the other two talents. Because Pain Tolerance, you generate 4 pain every second while below 20 pain, I don't find very attractive because as a tank, you always want to be able to have a little pool of your resource so that you can use your defensive abilities, whether it be Soul Clave or Demon Spikes. So if you're below 20 pain, chances are you either got spiked really hard and had to use all of your pain, or you're not managing your pain properly. It's a good stopgap if you're trying to get used to the pain, like Soul Flare and Feast of Souls are good passive options if you get used to the Demon Hunter, but I think Burning Alive definitely outpaces that extra pain generation because you should be above 20 pain usually. Violent Sigils is another passive option that ties in with your sigils. Because there's such a long cooldown, I don't see a chance of spawning a soul fragment to be a very valuable choice. If it always spawned a soul fragment, this choice might be more interesting, but because of the long sigil cooldown and the only chance to proc it, I don't really think this is a good choice. In the fourth tier, we have Blades of Anguish, Quickened Sigils, and Soul Rending. Blades of Anguish, I think, is the obvious only choice you can make in this tier. It gives your Sheer a chance to immediately reset the cooldown of Fellblade, because we want to Fellblade as much as possible to get that pain to use on Soul Cleaves and Demon Spikes. Having a chance to immediately reset it is very valuable, and I think it should actually be baked into the Sheer ability anyways instead of a talent, because it definitely is more attractive than the other two options in here and then feels mandatory and the choice is gone. Quickened Sigils makes all of our sigils targeted on us but reduces the cooldown by 20%. I don't really find this all that attractive because the beauty of sigils is that you could place them anywhere. Having them targeted only on you is a reduction in utility, but because you get them more often, that's why people might be using this. I think because the cooldown is only 20%, it doesn't feel like it would be better than Blades of Anguish. I think if the cooldown was 50%, even if it was targeted on you, it might be more attractive, especially if you tied it in with Violent Sigils. Soul Rending increases our leech while Metamorphosis is active. I don't really find this very attractive because, like I said, when we're going over a Metamorphosis, you can usually get between 3 and 5 soul cleaves off during it. And because you have a 30% increased maximum current health, that will usually take you from I'm about to die back to full without the leech. So throughout the fight, Blaze of Anguish I think would outperform both of these immensely. The 5th tier we have Nemesis, Sigil of Misery, and Soulmate. I think the choice here is between Nemesis and Soulmate, so I'll go over Sigil of Misery first. It gives us a 4th sigil that activates after 2 seconds like all of the other ones, and causes all enemies affected by the sigil to cower in fear and be disoriented for 10 seconds. I don't think this is very attractive because historically, disorients are able to break by taking damage or from anything else, and so if it was a stun or something like that, or it was obviously unbreakable, maybe it's useful just for like dungeon packs, being able to control certain things, having 10 seconds of freedom, something like that seems like it would be useful, especially when tying into your other sigil talents. But compared to the other two in a raid setting, I don't really feel like it has the staying power that the other two do. Nemesis is an ability we can use with a 2-minute cooldown, which increases the damage we inflict against a target by 10% for 2 minutes. So it's a 10% damage buff overall against our target, and then additionally, if it is killed during that time, we can inflict a 10% additional damage to all creature types matching that original target: humanoids, dragonkin, demons, undead, etc. for the remaining duration. Currently on alpha, it just creates a new 2-minute buff on you. I don't know if this is intentional, but you can proc Nemesis at the very end or the very beginning, and then when it dies, you could possibly have Nemesis back up to use again, so make it 20%? I don't know, but it doesn't seem intentional based off of the wording of the tooltip, but it's just interesting to note. This will increase our damage overall, which will increase our threat, and so it's a pretty strong choice. The other choice in this tier is Soulmate, which marks a friendly target as your soulmate for 15 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. Consuming a soul fragment heals you for your soulmate 3% of their maximum health, and obviously you for 5%. So it's a Beacon of Light Demon Hunter flavored cooldown. I think Nemesis is definitely going to be the strong choice in this tier, but with the tank and healer kind of balancing that's happening right now, Soulmate be more attractive in the future. We'll find out. The rest of the abilities are all coming soon, with Dark Overlord being teased. Summons 3 elite troops to heal and attack your enemies and lasts for 20 seconds. They'll probably summon a Shavara, a Naga, and an Ashtongue. All the different abilities, all the different classes and races that you dealt with in the starting zone. But again, it is not yet implemented like the rest of these bottom tier talents.